the Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Steven Cash here with my co-host, Mike Liskey, and we've got a special guest who we'll introduce in a moment. So every business, of course, has ideas, and some ideas, they live in slide decks, some live in strategy documents, some live in the mind of founders and executives and those who have spent years learning what works, but not every idea creates impact. And for an idea to change how people think, it has to move. It has to be expressed clearly, carried by others, supported by systems, and of course, offered generously enough that the right people can recognize its value. And today's topic is thought leadership that moves markets. And Mike, I know we're going to have a fun one today. Introduce our special guest.
We are, Stephen. We are going to have a fun one. So with us today is Bill Sherman. He's the COO of Thought Leadership Leverage. He's as well the co-host of the podcast, Leveraging Thought Leadership. And as well, he's the lead author of the book, the Thought Leadership Handbook. Now, Bill has spent quite a number of years helping executives, authors, consultants, and organizations to really turn expertise into ideas that scale. As the COO of Thought Leadership Leverage, he helps thought leaders really develop the strategies that can do amazing things. For example, create attention, impact, and importantly, business value, right? And together with Peter Winnick, Bill has co-hosted, check this out, more than 700 episodes of the Leveraging Thought Leadership podcast. So there's a wealth of information and knowledge there for our audience to check out. And interesting is their work with thought leaders forms really a major foundation for their handbook, the Thought Leadership Handbook. Now you'll love this idea. Bill's work centers around this really powerful idea, right? It's not really the expertise alone, that's not enough. Really, if leaders want their ideas to create change, they need to learn how to evaluate, systematize, and then share those ideas in ways that, and this is a big part of our show as well, right? Build trust and reach the people who need them. So with that, Bill, we are so looking forward to our conversation today. Welcome to the Bliss Business Podcast.
Thank you, Mike. And Stephen, great to be here.
Bill, so one of your topics is how ideas drive revenue. And you make the point that leaders should give their best ideas away so that they can grow their business. And why does that, I know a lot of organizations, to them that feels risky. Why is that the way to go, and why is holding back, kind of the bigger risk?
So I think especially in professional services and even in product development, there's a fear of giving away your crown jewels, right? The expertise that you know. And so the argument of, let me give my ideas away may sound scary at first. Let me give a few examples. First off, it's a way to attract attention for your ideas. You can change a conversation, or you can elevate a conversation that isn't being had at the current time, right? So one of the people in our book, Kara Golden, Kara founded Hint Water, the fruit infused water company. And she was doing this locally in the Bay Area. And she was trying to figure out, how do I scale this across the country? And so she's reaching out through her network and realized she has a problem because Hint Water doesn't have preservatives in it. And how do you do fruit infused water without preservatives? And so she winds up talking to a Coca-Cola executive, and she's at the point where she believes in the idea enough that she's almost willing to give it away to Coca-Cola because she feels it's filling a niche. And she doesn't know how to scale it. And the executive looks and says, no, it can't be done. You need preservatives. And so for her, the story of how to create this, how to focus on a brand that is tied to health, wellness, not artificial flavorings, becomes the marketing piece that gets people. And Kara tells a story, both to us, and then it appears in her book, that she was out in the world and she overhears other people, they've got hint water, and one asks about it. And she says, oh yeah, here's the story. The founder, she's really cool. She invented it in her kitchen and she found a way to bring this to scale. They didn't know Carol was dropping in. If you keep your ideas close, they don't travel. If you don't equip others to tell that story, they won't. And so if you want to have a disruptive product, if you want to grow in your market or launch into a new market or launch a new product, you've got to get people open to new ideas. And so the question of how do ideas scale becomes intimately tied to how do I get as many people talking about this as possible? Because I don't know about you, but I only have 24 hours a day and I can't reach 8.5 billion people.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Actually, I'm going to ask you a separate question, Bill. Hopefully I don't stump you. So oftentimes at our agency, I will tell our clients, hey, we really want to be at the intersection of provocative and authentic.
Yep.
And not necessarily provocative in the sense of sensational. But would you agree with that? I mean, do you?
Oh, absolutely.
Does it need to be provocative? Does it need to be sensational, or is that element not necessary?
If you look in the book, one of the frameworks we share, which is one that we've used for years, and I'm going to tie into the previous question before I go into this one. So when we wrote the book, we had a choice. Do we take the tools and frameworks that we use with clients every day, keep them behind the consulting paywall, and the only way you get to see them is come work with us and, we send invoices, right?
Right.
We made a choice to put the frameworks and tools. Now, some of the tools are adapted because what's possible to do in a book isn't necessarily what you can do in a consulting engagement.
Right.
But it's there. It's there. So if you look at one of the frameworks, the 4 elements of thought leadership, which answers the question, what is thought leadership from a practitioner's perspective, and how does it work, and do I have good ideas, and how do I make them better, which we've heard hundreds of times. One of the things I look for is a core idea. Okay, what's a core idea? Is it a book chapter? Is it a presentation? No. I use 4 characteristics to define a core idea. Number 1, it's provocative. We all spend our time scrolling through social media and deciding which ones we click see more on and which one we don't. We're making micro judgments of, is this for me or not me? You want to signal to the 99% of the world that doesn't care about your stuff, it's okay to scroll by. And at the same time, you want to signal to those people you're trying to reach in your target audience, hey, this is worth your time. A slow wind-up isn't going to get that attention. Provocative is the first thing, right? It's the difference between, my acting teacher years ago said, on stage you want to do the 7 deadly sins rather than the 7 parking tickets in presentation. People want to see something larger than life, and that works for ideas too. So core idea is provocative. Second, like Steve said, it has to be generous. You can't just say, this isn't working, this is wrong, we should do better. Okay, yeah, you can tell us it's broken, but what do we do about it? Give me some sense of hope there's a different way. You don't have to list everything and you don't have to give me the whole solution, but give me a little hope. So provocative, generous, distinctive. Does it sound like you? Does it sound like a bunch of other people in the conversation? Or worse yet, does it sound like AI? Right?
Yeah.
And then the final characteristic, a core idea, has to be 20 words or less. Because
Memorable.
the purpose of a core idea
Yeah.
is not to explain everything. It's simply to get people's attention and get them to say, oh, that's interesting. You know what? Tell me more. I'm not sure I agree with you. I'm not sure I understand the point you're making, but I'm willing to listen. Tell me more.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So provocative,
it's the
100%.
hook, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. It's the hook. And then as well, if it's short, like you say, it'll be memorable. So I'm curious, right? Living in this world of marketing as we do, there's a lot being done around content marketing. And then you distinguish really thought leadership from content marketing. Can you help our audience really understand the difference between content marketing and then that thought leadership?
So there's some lousy definitions of what thought leadership is. Okay.
Very true.
I have seen, including thought leadership is your smartest content marketing. Okay, that's not helpful at all. Thought leadership is what thought leaders do. Okay, we've got another circular definition. So, what is thought leadership and how does it distinguish from, say, content marketing and personal branding? Thought leadership is taking an idea to scale to create impact for a target audience. And often it comes from a place of generosity where you put your ideas out in the world so that people can encounter them, evaluate them, and maybe use them so that a smaller percentage will self-select in and say, hey, I'm a longtime listener of your podcast, or I read your book, or I saw what you put in that white paper or the presentation you made at your conference. It wasn't time 2 years ago when you made that presentation, but it is now. Let's talk. Thought leadership serves a useful business purpose. Content marketing is playing a different role. It's much more responsible to funnel lead gen, also serving the client customer education process. Okay. Thought leadership comes from a place that I describe as a both and role of generosity. One, that you're putting ideas out into the world. And two, you can make an amazing living through thought leadership, either as an individual or organization. One of the patterns that we've seen, many growth-minded CEOs use thought leadership to open doors their sales team can't, get into rooms their sales teams wouldn't have access to, and have conversations with peers to shift the conversation that a salesperson wouldn't be listened to.
Yeah, I think that last point is probably one of the more underrated aspects of having like a podcast or something like that is getting into these rooms with different people. That your sales team, good luck trying to get in there. But if we want to talk about something that we're both passionate about, much easier to do. I like the idea though of that thought leadership is what thought leaders do. That's like you can tell that it's a aspen tree because of the way that it is, right?
Right. Now, if I go further on that, thought leadership, if I take a bad definition and try to make it better, thought leadership is the process of sharing those ideas. And how do you know who's sharing well? It's the people who have a spark in their eye. They're eager to share this idea and make it accessible time and again to their audience.
Yeah, I like that. If you don't have that spark in your eye, it's not going to last very long. I wouldn't think. Because really,
no, because thought leadership, you have to say something hundreds of times.
Yeah, you got
to reach people. And if you look bored, your audience is going to check out, right?
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
got to
you're
have
going to have to
legs.
go on, 50 podcasts and say the same thing roughly over and over again. So if you're not feeling it, 30 in or whatever, the next 20, why bother? I would think at that point. So Bill, one of the things we talk about on this show a lot, and I know you've got a lot of input here, is really we're trying to systemize kindness, goodness, care, love, those kind of things. Come up with ideas that systemize things like that. So for you, what do you think kind of helps as far as moving someone in a systemized fashion to becoming more of a thought leader and creating more of that lasting impact? I think it's really important because of this, because you need other things to help keep that idea going, right?
Right.
And so what do you
So,
think on
couple
that side?
things here.
Yeah.
In terms of system, one of the things I look at in terms of system and process is, where does impact come from? Okay. In the book, you'll find an impact equation, which the idea needs to be simple. That simplicity allows others to share it. It also needs to signal relevance to its target audience, right? And say, this is why it's relevant today, or so that you're facing an issue that's coming around the corner and helping you prepare. The next piece is around, what velocity does the idea have? And velocity comes from two sources, you and not you, right? As I said earlier, I've only got so many hours in my day to share an idea. I've got other responsibilities, work, family, home, etc. But I want this idea to travel. The book is one way to get it to travel. This podcast, other podcasts that I'm doing, people who read it and share it with a friend and say, this is a good book, you should check it out. All of that is velocity that I didn't have to create. I had to first put the idea into the world, and then like-minded people can start sharing it and make it useful. So if you're creating a simple idea, you keep it relevant, and you focus very carefully on your target audience. I mean, marketers spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the TAM is for total addressable market, and then how do you increase that? I do the same looking at thought leadership is, don't tell me this is for 8.5 billion people. Who's this for? Tell me in the hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands, because then we can narrowcast and point cast to those individuals so they hear the idea and they embrace it. What you want to do eventually, whether it's fans and super fans, whether you get your idea embedded in industry. So think, for example, concepts in content marketing and social media marketing. Those began as an individual's idea. How do we do SEO, for example? Back in the 90s, sort of evolved in parallel with Google, right? But at the same time, if somebody didn't share those ideas, if those conversations didn't happen, we wouldn't have an industry that exists today on how do you get ideas out to the world. So you're addressing the same question through a systematized lens, right? There's an industry around this work. That's the work that you want to do, is how do you convince other people to spend some of their time talking about your ideas?
Mm. Yeah, it certainly has got to be worth it for sure. So I'm actually, then curious too, is there a bit of luck that's involved? Because there's some great insights out there that struggle to gain traction. Like, why is it? Was luck just not on their side, or why do some great ideas just?
Yeah, so lightning can strike, right? So we had a client some years ago who was at Stanford, studied under Carol Dweck. So Carol's body of work and research is around growth mindset, which you may have heard that term or read some of her writing. It's a powerful concept. He became her protege She was invited to deliver a TED talk back in the early days of TED. She had a conflict, couldn't do it. And Eduardo said, Carol, I could do this. And she said, okay. He said, I'm naturally an introvert, but I can practice. I'll come to your office. You can give me feedback. He does it. And for one reason or another, the algorithm blows up and serves his TED talk many, 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 many times in the millions, right? So is there a bit of serendipity? Yes. However, can you create opportunity for those conversations? Absolutely. There are things that are outside of your span of control. There are many more that if you focus with patience, persistence, relationship building, and in relationship, going back to your point, Steve, on love, sharing your knowledge, your network, and showing compassion, helping others, being one who says yes and when someone asks for help, that creates a well of goodwill so that when you come back and you say, hey, I have something I'm excited about and I want to share. Can you help me? They say, of course I will.
How do I know, thinking about that, something went viral, that's an obvious way that you're seeing like the idea taking off, but how do you know if, that's not going to happen for everyone, lightning in the bottle, like you mentioned.
Right.
But how do I know if my idea is traveling without me, like that phrase that you use? How do I kind of see that, yeah, this has traction?
So there's different ways to measure it, I would say, depending on the modality, right? So the two of you co-host a podcast, and actually several different podcasts that you're doing. One is tracking the downloads. Where is that going, right? We have a podcast as well. We get people who contact us and say, hey, I've been a long time listener. Now I think is the time where I'm ready to work with you, right? That's a huge signal from a business development perspective. Other things that I look for are people willing to put their name, time, energy, reputation, or resources supporting your idea, right? So for book launch, one of the things that you do is you go out to a lot of people and you say, hey, will you write a blurb or an endorsement for my book? You're asking them to loan some of their credibility to your work. That's an early signal if you're writing a book of, do I have something? Or they're like, yeah, I'm really busy right now. I'm sorry, I can't do that for you, right? Additionally, and Amazon reviews on a book, right? Who's taking the time to write an Amazon review on the book or a product review or whatever, right? Look at where people spend time, energy, reputation, and resources in support of the idea. And it's going to differ depending on whether you're practicing B2B or B2C as to the signals you're looking for, because consumer and customer client are different. But if you make the list of what would someone spend their time on, right? Referrals are a great signal as well, because that means somebody's talking about your idea to their friends and knows how to explain it to them enough to say, oh, check out their book or go talk to them.
So Bill, I'm curious, for our audience, besides working with, the Thought Leadership Leverage, your company, and working with yourself, let's just say you have a small team out there that feels they have this idea. What do they do first? Like, what do they need to start doing? Again, they don't have a large platform per se. Just what would you recommend to them?
So it depends on step number one. You don't need a large platform, and pursuing a large platform can be counterproductive, because if you have hundreds of thousands of people that don't fit your target audience, will never be buyers, are, curious, don't go cultivating them necessarily. Be deeply relevant to the people who need you, right? That's first step. Narrow your target audience as much as you can, because it allows you to speak in much more relevant language than sort of the, oh, this could be used by anybody at work, at home, in their social life. All of a sudden, it just gets watered down and it's not very strong.
Totally.
Yeah. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I would do after knowing my target audience is figuring out who is speaking. Is it one person? Is it multiple people in the organization? Where does your audience get information from? If I was leveraging resources and I had a small team and resources, I would say, okay, where does this audience already gather that I don't have to build an audience? Because building an audience takes time and effort and a long commitment. Borrowed media, earned media is fantastic for that. And then I would also say, test and hone your message. You can think of it from the off-Broadway, and Broadway place. Don't shoot for Broadway. Don't shoot for Good Evening Wembley Stadium, because you're not going to start out there, right? You've got to put in the time and the effort, but spend time where your audience is listening and play the long game.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of audience, we got a couple questions here. Let's pull those up from the audience.
Great.
All right. How can AI help without weakening authenticity?
Oh boy.
Ooh, that's a tough one in thought leadership. Okay. So here's one of the challenges that I've seen of thought leadership and AI. So we've had clients who have tried to codify their ideas using AI. And AI, unless you tell it to go research and say, who's currently talking about this? What have people said in the past? It will tell you whatever you've come up with is brilliant, necessary, and new. And so we've had to work with clients to say, okay, let's check that positioning and that language to make sure it's supported by your expertise, it's supported by your experience. Now, at the same time, if you're using AI and you say, okay, this is my target audience for this idea, and I strongly believe that organizations and products need brands, so corporate brands, individuals can develop a personal brand. You need to develop a brand for your ideas, right? So you can then start playing and saying, this is my target audience. This is my message. Evaluate as if, and tell me where I'm catching your attention and not. It's a good first sort of pilot before you send a trial balloon out into the world with real people to get some feedback and catch some of the obvious oopses, right? What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't hand off the responsibility for it to say, okay, this is our, positioning for this year, generate a white paper and an editorial plan and content. It's going to derive down to, at least at the current, sort of the average of what's already been said. It's not going to expand the conversation or provoke new conversation, net new. It's not good at that.
Yeah.
At least not yet.
Good point. Let's go to the next question. What do we have here? All right, it's from a LinkedIn user. How can introverted leaders share ideas effectively?
Oh, wow.
Great question, right? So there are plenty of studies that I don't have at hand to cite, but even from experience, I can say that I've worked with many executives who are introverts by nature, in ranging it from entrepreneurs all the way to Fortune 500. They will do the town halls, they will do the industry events and the speaking, but many of them don't want to do the mixers and the dinners. They'd rather go back to their room, even when they're traveling. They do it when they have to, okay? How do introverts advocate for ideas? First off, whether you're communicating internally or externally, it's got to be something that you believe in. Remember, I said that spark in the eye and the energy in the voice, and you can hear a smile. Your employees in a town hall will be able to tell if you're excited about the idea or not. And their level of excitement will never be higher than yours, let alone your customers will never be more excited than your employees. You can't manufacture that. What you have to do is be able to find the idea that you want to advocate for. And if you think about some of the people who have advocated and disrupted their industry, you could tell when Steve Jobs was on stage, he had the light in his eyes, right? It wasn't, I'm excited to announce the next product. No, he wanted to overturn how people were thinking, how they used technology, and how it interacted with lives. You have to find that space where, even as an introvert, the idea that you're sharing energizes you more than your desire to go be an introvert and recharge is. I'm an introvert, so I say the same thing, right? I've found my lane. If you were to ask me about other topics, I would not be an exciting guest.
I don't know about that, but we had some good Formula One discussions prior to the show here, but
we did. Right. But you also saw a spark in my eye when we were talking about it too, right?
That's true. But it's so important just because there's a lot of emotional energy, anxiety, things like that. If you're introvert, and if you've got that passion about something, that's going to help you get over some of that.
It gets over imposter syndrome and content insecurity. And let me define those. So imposter syndrome is, do I belong in this room? Will people listen to me? Who am I? All that stuff, right? Content insecurity is related, but equally insidious. It's, are my ideas good enough? Are they worth someone's time? Have they already been said? Don't people know this already? And going back to the point on good ideas traveling, there are plenty of good ideas that are in the world that don't get used, don't get adopted, Mike. It's not serendipity. They didn't have anyone actively advocating for them. And so one of the things I believe as a core is ideas can't speak for themselves. You can. And so, yes, it's an act of generosity to share an idea, put it out in the world. It's also very practical business sense if you're trying to disrupt or show a better way and you truly believe you've got a better mousetrap. And at the same time, people see that authenticity. They hear the joy in your voice when you're telling stories, and that when you find your lane, it's not a chore to speak, right? But if no one's speaking, no one's listening, nobody's hearing the idea, and it goes nowhere. I could go into plenty of academic libraries, find brilliant ideas that probably would be great for business, but no one's talking to them.
There's a lot of books out there. Yeah, in fact,
Indeed.
for that listener, I would say I would much rather the thought leader, be introverted, because to your point, that spark in your eye, or I think of it as the fire in your belly that you just can't shut up, right? For an introvert, if they're going to speak, that they're really motivated, as you were saying, by the topic, versus an extrovert who could be like, oh, I could talk about anything, to anybody, anywhere. So,
and there's an introvert superpower as well. A lot of introverts come to thought leadership because either they've had a question or something they've struggled with personally and they wanted to understand, whether it's a professional development skill, a business skill, something in business. They spend a lot of time studying it, doing introspection, trying to figure out how it works. I will admit that's my story. So when I stumbled into thought leadership in the early 2000s, I had a C-level exec who got a book on the cover of Fast Company magazine and was being asked to speak, and companies wanted him to help scale the skills in their organizations. I looked for books on, okay, thought leadership, I think is the right term. How does this work? There were not any in the early 2000s that answered those questions. So I built a lot of models and tools trying to figure it out and stumbling along the way. The book that I wrote is the book that I wished I could have bought, either secondhand or firsthand new back in 2005.
Right.
And that was me as an introvert trying to figure out, how does this work?
You've done the work for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why should anyone have to recreate it and struggle the same way? Take these ideas, elevate them for yourself. The world needs more and better thought leaders, because if we don't speak up, if the experts who have good ideas don't, it's not like social media and the conversation will just be quiet. It's not like the public square will fall silent. We as experts have to speak up and realize it's a noisy world.
Yeah, it is a noisy world. I'm so glad you said that, right? Because it seems like every day there's dozens of ring light experts just popping up.
Right.
Out there. And yeah, that's another thing. I always love to go back and look at the search history for a term. You see those charts on Google. I'm going to have to go back and look at when the term thought leadership really kind of, took off. Because I feel like within the last decade, it's just, spiked radically. But
so I can give you a basic answer to that, and then you go look at the chart.
Yeah.
So thought leadership gets first used in the 19th century as a term, thought leadership, thought leader, a couple times describing certain experts. Okay. But it's only a few times.
Yeah.
Joel Kurtzman in the 1990s uses the term, puts out a book titled The Thought Leaders, right? And he basically talks about the state of business. In the 1990s is when it enters the term, and it's been on a growth spike since. I mean, I think I looked earlier this year and there were 600,000 or so people on LinkedIn who either identified themselves as a thought leader in their short blurb description or had a formal role of thought leadership in their job description.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, that's a pretty massive audience there. So, Bill, one of the questions we ask everyone who comes on this show, and you can answer this however you want to, is some form of this is, what role should love play in business?
Short answer is everything, right? You should love what you do. You should deeply love and care about your customers or clients, and you should be willing to share. So I mentioned that I stumbled into thought leadership in the early 2000s. I was doing consulting, Fortune 500, organization development, strategic HR. I stumbled into thought leadership when Tim Sanders published a book called Love is the Killer App. Okay. At that time, very few people used the term app outside of Silicon Valley and knew what the heck it was. And killer app was a little bit, questionable. But he said love was the killer app. Business book, right? The framework, he said, was, okay, 3 things: share your knowledge, share your network, show compassion. And that's how you do business. Tim has been a friend and a mentor to me. And as a result, that's been sort of my guiding star in terms of the people I want to work with, the impact that I want to make in the world through business. And we were talking about improv earlier. you can keep things behind the paywall. But what if you bring it out? What if you share your knowledge? What if you say, hey, I can connect you to this person who will help you without trying to hold on to that relationship? Because Tim taught me, and I don't know if he would claim credit for the idea, but he taught me relationships are like muscles and they only get stronger when you work them, right? There's a give and take. And so if every time you're asking, people know that there's a invoice on the way, they learn to guard their wallets. But if you're the kind of person that people love to hear from, that they see as generous, that you have helped others, then they're ready to help you, small and large. I don't know how to do business another way. I know other people do. I just know it's not for me.
Yeah, agreed on all fronts there.
Agreed. So Bill, before we conclude, what's the one call to action, maybe perhaps from your book, that you would tell a leader? What would it be?
I'd go back to two things. One, ideas can't speak for themselves. You can. And then just because you have expertise in a field doesn't mean you have expertise in thought leadership. You can learn. And when you learn, you can create velocity for those ideas that create impact for individuals, teams, organizations, and yourself, right? This is, as I said, the world needs more and better thought leaders.
This is true. That's why we're here. So
Absolutely.
Bill, for our listeners, our followers, they want to learn a little bit more about you. Where would be the best place for them to do that?
Best place you can find me is on LinkedIn, and follow me there at Bill-Sherman-aha-moments. Or you can go to my website, which is also on screen, which is my personal site, aha-moments.com. And that has links to our podcast. It has links to the book. It has links to my company, Thought Leadership Leverage, and all sorts of the tools and frameworks that we talked about. You can at least get an intro to those frameworks on Aha Moments.
Bill, thanks for joining us today on the show. I think we could probably have a part 2, part 3 for sure on this topic. I feel like we just, barely scratching the surface.
Well, he's going to come on the ETF marketing podcast, Steve.
Go buy the book.
The conversation will continue.
Yeah. So, and to our listeners,
it will.
Great questions too, as well. I love the question about the introvert too, being in the mix there.
Another book I'll give a shout out to is Susan Cain's book, Quiet, The Secret Power of Introverts, if I've got the subtitle right. Her book is fantastic as well. Look at also Influence Without Authority. Those are 2 books I'd recommend for introverts.
Excellent. Awesome. All right. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next time on the Bliss Business Podcast.